Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Dan, the voice behind ThatKaitoDan, and recently while I was over in England, I finally managed to pick up this, the official RWBY manga adaptation. And it's a good thing I did too, because it definitely made the 2 hours spent on the plane go by much faster. And I recently asked folks on the Twitterverse if they would like to hear my thoughts on the RWBY manga. Many of you said yes, so here we are. Now, this is just going to be my opinion, and you guys will obviously have your own opinions on the manga, and you're more than welcome to leave them in the comments down below. And also, I will be going on spoilers for both the main show and the manga itself, just to help get my point across, so please, 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 watch with caution. But with all that out of the way, let's finally go over my thoughts for Team RWBY's manga debut with the official RWBY manga adaptation. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty itself, a little background insight first. The manga is written and illustrated by Shirow Miwa, who's previously known for his series Dogs, Bullets and Carnage. He's also been a character designer for the anime Kiznaiva and an illustrator for both the Devil May Cry light novels and the J-pop band Supercell. There are a total of 15 chapters, though it's condensed to 12 in the Western release, and each chapter was released monthly in the Japanese magazine Ultra Jump. As for the English translation, that is thanks to Viz Media, who is partnering with Rooster Teeth in publishing any of the series' ventures into manga to the Western audience, including the releases of the 4 Team RWBY side story anthologies, with RWBY's Red Like Roses book out now in some locations, so do keep an eye out for that and the rest. And in case you guys are curious about how the events of the manga tie into the main series canon, Miles and Kerry did act as consultants to make sure things were consistent with the series, and the contents are considered canon until it's not, or canon until the main show contradicts it. But what is the plot of the manga? Well, it's largely about delving into the motivations of the 4 main girls via retellings of the original color trailers from before the series began, with new scenes and details expanding the backstories in various ways. That's about 2/3 of the full package, while the final third is a completely new story involving Teams RWBY and Juniper that takes place between volumes 1 and 2. Of course, with this being a manga and a totally different medium for the series, I want to start off properly with talking about the art. Now, I've gone and had a brief scouting of Shirow Miwa's other works, and honestly, I think he was an excellent pick for this project, as a lot of his style is full of strong expressions and dynamic choreography akin to the usual RWBY style, most present as you would imagine in the action. The more rougher designs to the characters adds an extra layer of toughness to the fights, while still capturing the flair and personality of each character, despite the lack of motion. A few times the more detailed designs and the stylish combat does make it a bit hard to keep track of what's going on, especially in the larger sequences, but the style is an excellent representation of RWBY's iconic look, and thankfully, the positives in the art aren't just limited to the fighting. For as sharp as the designs look compared to the more sleek and rounded visuals of the show, the art style works just as well for the calmer character exploring parts of the volume, especially in the expressions. The freedom that the manga has over the animation's 3D models means that Miwa was able to deliver some incredibly artistic expressions. RWBY alone has some of the most vibrant of the bunch, and the rest of the cast get in on the fun as well, be it comedic or dramatic. The manga isn't shy on its lighthearted moments, and the points in the stories where you need the expressions to help deliver on the emotions. So I'm glad to see that that aspect of the show wasn't hindered by an art style that definitely leans itself towards benefiting the combat the most. You may also notice that Team RWBY have reworked outfits for the cover and during the final story. RWBY and Weiss both have outfits that are similar to their Volume 2 variants, with some additions like gloves and tights thrown in. Blake meanwhile has a different top design, complete with full-length cross armbands, and Yang has a camouflage pattern for her jacket instead of brown. It's nothing too grand, but it's a cool changer for this special occasion, and the new touches still keeping track with the style and the personalities of each girl. There are a few visual nitpicks I have, mind you. For one, even though I do rate the facial expressions extremely well, Jean was a tad over-expressive for my liking, and it ties into the lad being stuck in his terrified, out-of-his-league persona throughout the manga, which I think doesn't really portray his character in the best light, especially for newcomers. Also, while I'm sure this is a directive aesthetic that's used in manga a lot that I'm not familiar with as someone who doesn't review the medium before now, there were a handful of blank sections on pages with no details to them that cut out my immersion, which is a shame for those really gripping parts. And going back to the designs, I don't know how to feel exactly about the fan service vibes getting a boost compared to the show, mostly with breast sizes. With Yang, I get it, since it's hardly uncommon for her character to be seen as visually appealing. It's a tiny issue, I'll admit, but it still felt a little weird in comparison to how fan service as a whole is handled in the series prior to this. Going over each of the story segments now, things start off with the iconic tussle between RWBY and the Beowulfs from the Red trailer, and it's a brilliant way to introduce Miwa's striking art style, just like the trailer did for showcasing Monty and his masterful animation work. Heavy hits look brutal, RWBY's insane speed is captured in full force, brilliant frozen in time images, and the grim look especially menacing before RWBY cuts them all to ribbons, ending on a gorgeous shot of RWBY overlooking Summer's grave. But the Red trailer isn't the focus of RWBY's chapters. Instead, her story is set at Beacon, seemingly a few days after Team RWBY is formed, and the premise involves the Reaper taking on resident douche canoe Carden in a fight, following some altercations involving Jean. Side note, look at that face. Somehow Miwa made Carden look even more punchable. Anyway, it's a change in scenario that I approve of, since the Red trailer was a blank slate with not much else that could be expanded on story-wise in just a few chapters. Having RWBY's segments center on her early days instead at Beacon that we didn't get to see allows for a better opportunity to explore her quirks, motivations, and as seen in this segment, some of her weaknesses. RWBY's well known for being the spirited kid with a lot of eagerness to her, but I'm glad this scenario let us see her overcome her initial bout of weak confidence, an aspect to RWBY's character that was introduced early on in the show, which makes a comeback here as she looks to steady herself mentally, now her hopes of becoming a hero like her idols is making progress. Having that element neatly tie into her relationship with her team, who support her in their own unique ways, and the subtle explanation for why she always wears her hood was also a nice heartwarming touch amongst the short but still enjoyable scuffle. RWBY's focus is actually split up into two parts, with her closing thoughts and a quick flashback of Crow added to the closing chapters of the volume. But this was a charming first section of the book, and it set up the theme of exploring what inspires these kids with a well-executed presentation. My favorite portion though comes next, with Weiss's chapters. On top of a stellar retelling of the fight against the Armagigas Knight, along with some of the best artwork of the entire volume, this section introduces new elements into the heiress's personal narrative that better explores her drive to break free from the Schnee name and her father's control before she stepped foot inside Beacon. For starters, the fight is given context that was absent in the trailer, with the whole thing being revealed to be a test of Weiss's abilities tasked by those working for her father, who is dismissive of her intentions. We also get to hear Weiss internally discuss her desire to be seen as her own person, complete with flashbacks to help sell the weight of her strife and loneliness. And Winter appears as well, now that she's a key figure in the series, and she's shown to be the first person to genuinely care about Weiss and her feelings amongst the sea of disingenuous praises. A welcome addition to this retelling, not just for what this adds to Weiss's conviction, but also to why Weiss adores her sister so fondly compared to her father. The addition of a stand-in for Jacques in the form of his smarmy secretary overseeing Weiss's training brilliantly highlights as well in a simple but effective way just how distant Jacques truly is from his daughter. The guy won't put in the time to see Weiss showcase her determination to go to Beacon, so instead he sends his underling, who tries to talk her down with shallow comments and a dangerous test meant to break her spirit. I was already a massive Weiss fan before reading this volume, and that fondness continues thanks to these chapters, summarizing a lot of what makes her this remarkably engrossing character, and the new touches definitely help make an already fantastic story leave a bigger impression. Then we have Blake's segment, which goes over her involvement in the train heist from the Black trailer alongside Adam. Compared to the previous two segments, this one sticks closer to having the same events and context as the trailer, though it's not just a one-to-one copy. Yes, we still have Blake and Adam fighting the Elysian Knights and the Spider Droid, plus Blake leaving Adam and the White Fang at the end. But tidbits like Blake's Faunus identity are more pronounced, and then there's a present day scene at the end which has a slew of delightful expressions to end the piece on a warm note, especially for fans of certain ships. That's not to say there's nothing deeper to discuss about this whole thing though, as there are still a few extra details of note that stand out, such as a very short sample of the kind of suffering that Blake had to deal with growing up as a Faunus that led to her joining the faction in the first place, thanks to Adam. Though, when this chapter first came out, we didn't have Gira or Carly introduced in the main series, so Blake's family ties to the White Fang wasn't worked into this retelling like Weiss's was. I appreciate glimpsing at the prejudice that Blake had to endure, but I just wish it was a more focused plot point, and not just seen on a single page, since when Blake's past has been discussed in the main series, any abuse that she's personally faced that isn't tied to Adam hasn't been brought up, and I would have liked if we got to explore that a little bit more. It's interesting as well that Adam makes a lot more mid-battle quips than before, though he still maintains his hardened and focused nature. Sure, he did have that playful comment on the train in the trailer, but that was played more serious, definitely more so compared to his dialogue in the manga. However, I find myself surprisingly really liking this, at least at this point in the story. The vibe that I get from this different approach is this is the Renegade's composure on full display when he's working with Blake. Maybe he believes that Blake will never leave his side, no matter what they are faced with, so he feels that he can stand to be a little bit more confident and a bit more casual on a mission. This is supported as well when Adam's overconfidence nearly gets him killed, if not for Blake, yet he just brushes it off like it's nothing to worry about. He's that sure that Blake will always be there to watch his back even if something slips by him. Of course, that belief is crushed once Blake does leave him and the White Fang, and because of this more expanded look at how Adam views his relationship with Blake, his violent attitude towards her later in the series has a greater emotional impact. This guy truly feels betrayed by the one person he seemed to trust with his life. The person that he first brought into the White Fang abandoned the cause and wanted to cut him out of her life. So, add Adam's feelings of broken trust alongside his dangerous vengeful nature and his warped feelings of love for the girl, and it's no wonder the guy is a powder keg of unhinged rage and brutality, especially when it comes to Blake. After that, the final retelling features Yang's brawl in the club from the yellow trailer, and that's pretty much the bulk of the segment, just Yang knocking the hell out of Junior and the Malachites, but with a bit more banter. It's a lot like Blake's section, with the action set piece following the same roadmap as the trailer, only with a slight bit of new material stitched in, so those hoping for something deeper might be a bit disappointed. At least this battle has some more lovely artwork, and my god does Miwa nail Yang's energy and charisma as she kicks ass. This one shot of her standing
pardon the punny reference, armed and ready, perfectly embodies Yang's larger-than-life, thrill-seeking persona with her wild flowing locks burning upwards and her face full of life, even in a hostile situation like this. It's Yang to a T, and in terms of Miwa's character body artwork, it's up there among the best in the entire volume, alongside the brilliant close quarters combat. Junior, by the way, looks far more intimidating in the manga than he does in the animation, more akin to a big gorilla than his baby bear origin. It was quite the striking visual when I first saw him, since in the series, while he did get his hands dirty, he wasn't all that imposing, fitting more to his information broker role than being an all-out bruiser. He even does a better job in the fight, getting in some strong shots and teaming up more often alongside the twins. Though once the fight is done, Junior seems to respect Yang despite the damages to him and the club. The big guy even is willing to listen to Yang's questions and take the blame for the fight when RWBY later shows up. It's different, but nothing bad, just a new spin on things that works just as well. As for that new bit of insight on Yang, while it's quick, it still provides some appreciated context to why Yang rages should her hair get damaged. The manga's interpretation being that RWBY finds it pretty like a burning dragon. Sure, that might not seem like the most eye-opening of revelations, but it works for symbolizing the pair's deep, loving sisterly bond. Yang and RWBY care about each other so much, and Yang would do anything for her little sister. So the idea of Yang's love for RWBY being so strong that even something that tiny means the whole world to her tells you all you need to know about what Yang views as important in her life, and what she'll do should anyone try to harm their happiness. Just trade out the damage to the hair with RWBY's life on the line, and you're going to be facing one hell of a raging fire. So that's the 4 trailer-based parts of the volume looked at, but then we move on to the original story, involving Team RWBY and Team Juniper, as well as Roman Torchwick, who pokes his head in throughout the volume a few times. But here, he's looking for a passage to Mountain Glen, before accidentally letting loose a possession-type tentacle grim that fuses with some rampaging King Taijitu into one massive, multi-headed serpent, akin to the legend of Yamato no Orochi. This beastie looks incredible, and you really get the sense of scale and terror behind it, even if its size does make for some crammed and hard to track action once or twice, like I mentioned before. Going back to Torchwick, and while his overall involvement doesn't really lead up to much in the grand scheme of things, I'm cool with this being all that we get out of the villains, since the larger chain of events with him and Cinder's crew and everything that goes down in volume 3 would only get in the way of what this manga is trying to accomplish as a collection of Team RWBY focused character exploration, before things get more chaotic. At the very least, Roman's appearance does lead to a gem of a cameo from Penny. It's random as heck, and some of her cameo will be lost heavily on first timers, but it's still adorable all the same. Juniper's focus is understandably tiny compared to their sister team, but you still get a decent grasp of who they are and what their personalities and skills are like. The only exception being Jean, who, as I said before, has his weakling aspect played up a little too strongly for my liking. He does get his bright moments at points, and Pyrrha is still a delight as ever with her supportive heart and excellent fighting skills, plus Nora and Ren are just fantastic with their charming quirks. So for as bare minimum as these 4 get, it's entertaining despite its one-note approach. Also, it seems even the manga has the bad habit of sometimes misspelling Pyrrha's name. Oops. The fight itself is a roller coaster of excellent still frame visual action and light-hearted thrills, once again capturing the flow and energy of classic RWBY fighting, and the chemistry of all 8 students is delivered in natural, colourful dialogue amongst the mayhem. Bookended as well with the culmination of RWBY's commitment to becoming a huntress alongside her friends. A few deeper plot points gets teased at the end with Torchic and Ozpin, and there's also some more bonding and bantering, and we also get this awesome dual page collage of the characters that are featured in the first 2 volumes that I would love to see made into a proper colour poster, if there's not one already out there. And that closes up the RWBY manga. So, what do I think about it overall? Well, I think it's a terrific read, and well worth the price. But it's obviously a lot more rewarding for fans of the series, and either way, it's not a flawless read. The art style was a fantastic fit for the RWBY world and its characters, though the dense set pieces can be a bit of an eyeful at times, and the blank space issue is again something that can rip you out of your immersion very easily. Narratively, stuff like Blake's abuse as a faunus should have had more than just a page of focus. Also, Yang's segment being 99% a retread of old ground was a slight drag, and some of the dialogue overall felt like a victim of multiple translations, with a few out of place lines being used, like the early mention of magic, something that isn't truly a concept in the show until volume 3. And this may confuse new readers when trying to understand such things as aura or semblances, and why they aren't seen as magic in this world. But a lot of those issues are trivial compared to the good that this manga does. The artwork is sublime, the expanded knowledge on certain character arts and traits are explored fantastically, and all in all, I'd say this is an excellent supplementary piece to enjoy regardless of your experience with RWBY. Newer fans or early viewers who may have been turned off by the aging animation of Volume 1 can quickly get absorbed in this unique world in an easy to digest sample of what's in store should they take the full plunge. And for veteran fans like myself, the new details, amazing character interactions, and the intrigue of exploring RWBY through a new medium should definitely be worth the price of admission. Both parties could easily enjoy this volume as an added feature to Volume 1, though you don't necessarily need to read this to further your enjoyment of the series. I'm glad the series is continuing to break new ground with projects outside of the animation, and as I mentioned before, we're getting even more manga works on the horizon. And after reading this adaptation, I'll happily say that I would love for Shirow Miwa to return with a sequel down the line. Of course, this is just my opinion, so what about you guys? Have you read the manga, and was it good or bad? Would you like to see more RWBY manga like this in the future? Let me know in the comments down below, and while you're down there, hit the subscribe and bell buttons to make sure you get every new video from me as they drop. And follow me on Twitter at ThatKaitoDan for more on all things RWBY related, as well as updates on future content and more. Until next time though, have a good day or good night, and peace out.